Okay, let's continue with our journey here and talk a bit about logical operators. So logical operators are operators that will also enable us to combine multiple instructions at the same time. They consist of three different logical operators: and, or, and not. Okay, so these three words that I've said, and, or, not, are the logical operators that we'll learn right here. And let's go a bit slow here because this may be a bit confusing at first, but I'll go really slow for you also to be able to take a breath and understand all the steps that we are doing. Because this is not a trivial question here in Python, okay? So if I do, for example, 1 equals to 1, as we've seen before, we have true as the returning value, right? Now, what if I want to check these two conditions? If 1 is equal to 1 and a is equal to a, how can we connect both of these conditions? We can do it with an AND keyword. So if I do 1 equals 1 and a equals to a, let's see what we'll have. We'll have true because both of the conditions are true. What if I put one of the conditions as not true? For example, if 1 is equal to 1 and a is equal to b, let's see. I'll have a false because with AND, all the conditions in the expression must be true. Okay, so what's happening right here is this. Let me go, for example, for a equals a first. For a equals a, we have the following. We do 1 equals 1, then this is again not syntax from Python. Let me put it in Markdown so you don't confuse it with the Python syntax. So I'll put this also here to have bold. Okay, so first we have this, right? 1 equals 1. Let me also put this inside the code in brackets here in Markdown. 1 equals 1 and a equals a. This will yield the following. Okay, so this will yield 1 equals 1 is true and a equals a is also true. Let me put the true as in Python true. And then true and true will be equal to true. So this is the logic behind what Python is doing. Okay, so it's comparing, it's seeing if this condition is true, it's seeing if this condition is true. If both of them are true, then this logical operator will return true. In this case, this one right here. Okay, true. Now let's see the false. Now the example that I had with the false was the following one: a equals b, and here I'll do this. Let me put here. So what we have is the following: 1 equals 1, this should maintain true. A equals to b, now this is a false. And what happens when we have a true and false? We have as a return a value of false. Let's confirm that. If I do true and true here and return, I'll have true. If I do true and false, I'll have false. Okay, just make sure that you understand this rule, which is for an AND to return true, all conditions in the statement must be true. I can also use here AND b is equal to b. I can put various statements in this condition. Only one of them must be false to make all the condition and all the expression be false. For example, is 1 equals to 2? Now this will yield to false because these ones are still true, these conditions are still true, but this one is not. And that changes significantly the result of the logical operator. So this is of course something that you can expand for other things that we've learned with other operators. 1 is greater than 0, it is, and 2 is greater than 1. This will of course yield to true because both conditions are true. I can of course, if I change this sign to less than, I'll have a false because true is not greater than 1. Make sure you remember this rule that AND needs all the conditions in the expression to be true. But we also have another condition to let us return true if only one of the conditions is true, which is the OR keyword. So this OR right here. So for example, 1 equals 1 or 2 equals to 1. Of course, this one will yield to true, this one will yield to false. In this case, we'll have a true because only one of the conditions must be true to have a return as a true. Now, of course, if I have two falses, I'll have a false in the return. Okay, so the difference between the AND and the OR is basically this. AND needs all the conditions to be true, or will return to true if only one of the conditions is true. So let's just finish this example of the OR by making our small sketch. So let me put 1 equals to 1. Then what happens is the following. We'll have true or false, and in this case the true or false will return true, because again OR just needs one of them to be true. Let's confirm that in the console. True or false, and false or false, of course, will yield false. Before we continue, remember that every time you are doing this expression, what you are doing in reality is really substituting this expression by what it returns, with a comparison that we get in the return. So this 1 equals to 2 will become false, and we'll evaluate the false, and here the same, we'll evaluate the false, the returning comparison from each individual comparison operator. Okay, remember that every time you are running this should be substituted by true or false, depending on if this condition is true or not. This is all tied with what we've learned in the comparison operators that return Boolean elements. Okay, so this should make sense right now to you. We have another logical operator, which is the not. The not basically just negates what we have inside the parentheses. So I have not, and everything that I pass inside this parenthesis will be negated, meaning that will be reversed. So if I have a true inside, or I yield some true inside, I'll have as a return a false. But if I have a false, I'll return a true. So imagine that the not, what it only does is reverse what you have inside the parentheses. So if I have not 1 equals to 1, can you guess what this not will return? Now pause the video and see if you can think through this example what this will yield. Okay, assuming you pause the video, let's see. It will yield to false. Why? Because this 1 equals 1 will return true, and not true is equal to false, because the not reverses what's inside the parentheses. Okay, so everything that we've done so far, if I pick up an arbitrary, let's see this one, that yields to false, and put here a not wrapping all this expression, what I'll have is the opposite of the outcome of this expression, because the not does that, it negates the expression.